Oh, well, hello everybody and welcome to the channel, or back to the channel. As you can see, I've been having a bit of a print marathon, and what you're looking at here on the desk and on the screens behind me is one photograph taken with the Fuji XT3, but it's been processed 4 different ways. So using 4 different softwares, techniques, whatever you want to call it. And in today's video, I'm going to go over those 4 techniques and talk about which one I've decided to use going forward when processing my Fuji XT3 files. So before I get started, I just want to say a massive thank you to Squarespace for continuing to sponsor this channel going into 2020. So if you need a website, go to squarespace.com/Heaton. And also one more thing I just quickly want to mention, which I never ever mention, and that is I have a newsletter. And one of the things I want to do going forward in 2020 is to use that newsletter more. And I don't mean in a spammy way. What I do at the minute is I announce photo tours and speaking events and all that kind of stuff through the newsletter. Well, I want to use it more like a blog kind of thing. So, newsletters that give a bit of an insight into the behind the scenes of some of my videos and trips and stuff like that. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, if you go onto my website, click on any page, go to the bottom there, you will see an option to sign up to my newsletter. Okay, so let's talk about the Fuji XT3. When I purchased this camera, I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit disappointed by the files when I imported them into Lightroom, but then after a little bit of research, it quickly became obvious that Lightroom is not the best software to process the Fuji RAW files. And that's to do with the sensor and I don't know. I mean, I could go on Wikipedia and read out some stuff about the X-Trans sensor, and it's an array sensor and not a conventional Bayer. Who cares, right? I'm an average consumer, and when I buy something, I expect it to work, and that isn't always the case. So I'll look for the simplest and easiest solution to correct any issues that I'm having. I should also say at this point, I don't have a very scientific background. I'm not an expert. I just want to make a video showing you guys how I process my XT3 files. So don't really take it as like advice, more just a bit of a guide, okay? Because there are many ways to get great results from the XT3. So here are the 4 methods that I tested using RAW files from the XT3. The first one was just RAW file straight out of the camera into Lightroom. The second one was RAW file straight out of camera into Lightroom, but using Lightroom's enhanced details feature. The third one was using a completely different software altogether, which is Capture One. And the fourth and final method that I tested was using a Lightroom plugin called Iridient X-Transformer. So, method number 1, straight out of the camera into Lightroom. The problem with the sensor in the XT3 and the problem with the way that Lightroom sort of renders the file is that it doesn't look very good. The image straight out of camera into Lightroom looks very bitty, I suppose you would say. Very technical term, that bitty. It looks very crunchy, looks like it's been over sharpened, and of course you have the infamous worm effect. When you zoom into the image, you can see strange things going on. So straight out of camera into Lightroom, the images, they do not look great, and I found it very difficult to really try and correct this. The second method, which is using Lightroom's enhanced details feature, this got me very excited because this would be the easiest and fastest solution for me. But unfortunately I found that whilst using the enhanced details feature did clean up the file, and when you initially look at it, it does look better. But when you spend a bit more time looking around the file, you realise that you've actually lost a lot of information there. A lot of detail is lost, not enhanced. And the image looks considerably softer than the original file, which actually looks too sharp, looks too crunchy. So enhanced details, although did fix the problem, introduced many more problems. The third option, Capture One. Wow. I can see why the pros use Capture One. The file looked fantastic. It looked as good as my 5D Mark IV files look in Lightroom. Capture One does an amazing job of opening the RAW file. It looks great, nice and smooth, and it looks like a really nice, clean file. So Capture One, as I said before, I can definitely see why the pros use that. The final and fourth method is a plugin, Iridient X-Transformer. You download it, it's about $36, and you install it as a plugin into Lightroom. Very simple, one click and it's in there. And what that does is it converts your Fuji RAW file to a DNG file, and it takes care of sharpening, noise, and lens correction. So you don't need to worry about any of that. And I have to say that this method, the results, when you look at the DNG file, are very close to the Capture One results. So the image looks cleaner, it looks better, and especially on a 5K monitor, when you look at it at 1:1 as well, you can clearly see the difference. So I was very impressed with the Iridient X-Transformer. But is all of this necessary? That's the question. Is it all necessary? Because whilst you're pixel peeping at 300% on a 5K monitor, of course you're going to see those imperfections. But what about the real world? So I did some prints. I've done 4 prints here, and each print is a different method. So you've got Lightroom Capture One, Lightroom Enhanced Details, and Iridient X-Transformer plugin. And again, I would say that during all of my testing, the images, they were all processed the exact same way. So in Lightroom, I edited one master file and then synchronized the other files, so the other Lightroom files, with the exception of sharpness. With Lightroom, I left that to default, which is 40, and the Iridient X-Transformer DNG, the default is 0. So I left those just as is. And obviously Capture One, I couldn't synchronize that file, but I did process it exactly the same way in which I processed these, and pretty much it looks identical in terms of color and sharpness, you know, everything. It wasn't processed any differently. And here we have 4 prints. Now, looking at these 4 prints, you cannot see a difference. You can't. These are printed on A3 paper, so they're a good size. You know, they're not giant prints, but they are a good size. And you know, if you look at them through a loop, very close up, then yeah, okay, you can see minor differences. But looking at each print by itself, you cannot see a difference. And I challenged myself to try and pick which was which, and I couldn't do it. They all look exactly the same, which is interesting and got me thinking. I did another test where I sent each image low resolution to my phone, as if it was on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. And again, I couldn't see a difference in quality. So it appears that the only real noticeable difference between the files, and the only real problem with the X-T3 file straight into Lightroom, occurs at, you know, during the editing process. I'm not saying that the images are fixed when you export them, but when you're editing, you tend to be up close 1:1, you tend to be looking at a high-res monitor, so you start to see these imperfections and problems. But in the real world, within videos and in print and on your phone, which is where 95% of images are consumed, you can't see a difference, which begs the question, is any of this necessary? I still think it is, because you really want to enjoy the process of editing the images. I know I do. I don't want to be looking at my files and constantly thinking, oh, it looks so crunchy. You want the best file to work with from the offset. So although in the real world you can't see much of a difference, that's encouraging for people who perhaps can't afford to start changing their system and changing the way they work, or they can't afford to buy a plugin, or they can't afford to buy Capture One or whatever. It's not completely necessary, but if you want a good user experience when processing the raw files from the Fuji X-T3, then I would recommend either Capture One or the Iridient X-Transformer plugin. Now let me say this, the method that I've chosen going forward with all of my files from my Fuji X-T3 is Iridient X-Transformer plugin. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because it's a plugin that goes straight into Lightroom. The results are almost as good as Capture One. There's very little between it. Very little between it. And my whole livelihood, my whole ecosystem, my whole workflow is based around Lightroom. And to switch from Lightroom to a whole new system, which would be Capture One, would be a nightmare for me. It just would be. So I would need to have seen a huge difference between Capture One and the plugin. And there wasn't a huge difference. It was pretty close. Therefore, I'm happy to stay with Lightroom and use this plugin. I've got 10 years of images catalogued. I can't just switch like that. But what I would say is if you exclusively use X cameras, I use a Canon as well, that's another reason not to switch from Lightroom. But if you're an exclusive Fuji user, perhaps you're fairly new to photography, so you don't have years and years of images backed up and catalogued and categorized in Lightroom, then I would recommend Capture One over Lightroom. I really would. I'm not in a position to switch, but if you are and you don't have this whole ecosystem in place yet, then definitely look at Capture One because it's a fantastic piece of software and it squeezes every inch of goodness out of those Fuji files. But sadly, that is not the case for me. I will be sticking with Lightroom and the X-Transformer plugin. As well as that, a huge thank you to everybody who's emailed me, commented on videos, left me messages over the past month or so with advice on how to get the most out of my XT3 files. And if it wasn't for you, then I wouldn't be able to make this video. You know, you've given me so many different avenues to explore. And I appreciate all of them, and I'm sorry if you didn't get a reply, but yeah, there was just so many. It's very difficult to reply to all of them. So thank you guys so much for watching. Another big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. If you don't know who Squarespace are, well, they are a drag and drop all-in-one. It's basically a website, right? And you go on and you make your website using their website, their platform. I can't make websites at all. I have no experience. But I managed to knock out a website in a couple of hours for my Antarctica conference that I'm running later on this year. And it was so easy, so easy. So if you want a photography website for your work, go to squarespace.com/Heaton. Use the free trial. And if you like free trial, then use the offer code Heaton and you will get 10% off your first purchase. All right. Thank you so much for enduring this video. If you're still with me now and you're still with me after that massive Squarespace plug, then thank you, and you may as well subscribe if you're not already. So I'm going to go and continue processing all of my Fuji files. So till next time, thank you for watching and goodbye for now.